Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. We have a special week devoted to John Steinbeck, and today I thought we would discuss his 1952 novel, East of Eden. Joining us is return guest Ozzie Gomez. Welcome, Ozzie.
Good to be here, guys. Good to be here.
All right. I'm going to let you start, Ozzie, but I want to say this, that I want to get your take, and you could talk about, I'll ask you the question. I do want to say that there was a moment in this book that forced me to put the book down. It was very good, but it was so intense.
Did we mention the name of the book?
Yeah. The book is East of Eden. I did mention it, but you're right. Let's mention it again.
Keep up, Jake. Okay?
All right.
Keep up.
But I was reminded, because you and I both teach literature, I was reminded of why I love this job is because when you come upon the great one, a little bit later, maybe I'll bring up the moment of the book, but that books can still do that to us.
Yeah.
In the midst of all the gadgets we have, we can just still be moved like this. And boy, did this book move me. How would you start in describing what makes this book so powerful?
I think just the scope of it. I mean, I don't know if your viewers have read it. I have my copy here. I mean, look at the size of this thing, right?
Big mama.
It's just the incredible scope of it. It's ambitious, Look at that. I mean, it's very ambitious. It's multi-generational. You have to be on your toes with this novel, and it's interesting how it came about, because I mentioned the last time I was on your podcast that I chose it for my AP class because I want to have the kids read. I called it a BAB, right? A big ass book. Because, we live in a society right now where everything is so small and quick and fast, and the text and the post. And I don't know how many of these kids will actually have the opportunity to read a big novel. So that was actually one of my goals for every year that I taught AP, was to choose a 400 plus page novel. And this is one of the years that I chose this book. And it kind of came about kind of weird because I have to give credit to my wife. She's a huge classic movie fan.
Oh,
wow. You could just put her on the couch and turn her classic movies, and she's the happiest person in the world. Wow. And so we were watching, and East of Eden came out, and I thought, hey, I looked it up, and it was like 500, 600 pages or something like that. I said, that's the one right there. And I picked it up, and I started reading it, and I could not put it down. There's just something about it that is just so enthralling. Just, the way he writes, the characters that are so developed, it was incredible. I couldn't say enough of it.
I think John Steinbeck, because I was looking into it, his psyche as he wrote this, and I think he believed that this might have been his greatest book. I mean, of course, people would argue maybe Grapes of Wrath is it, right? But I think he felt it. Like, this is it. This was it. This was my nugget.
Yeah, I did read that too, and I thought, he's written so many wonderful. I mean, Of Mice and Men. We all read that in middle school, and I still read it now, and it's amazing. It's a fantastic book.
It is.
But I can see how he would feel that. Like, it would feel like this was his Everest,
Yeah. Well, since we're on the subject of characters, one of you mentioned it. I think it was Ozzie. Let's have you pick a character to discuss. And pick your choice, Ozzie. We'll give you first. By the way, as I was reading this, because last week we read and we reviewed the talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith, and after I read this, I was thinking I should start a little unit or a class titled "Sociopaths in Literature." That might be intriguing.
I like that. Yeah.
Kids would love that.
And this book has one, and you could start there, Ozzie, or pick a different one.
You went there. Let's just go there. Let's just go straight to it.
I want to talk to that person. Go ahead.
Let's talk about Kate. Let's talk about Kathy. She's. I think you mentioned in the beginning where there was a moment where you put the book down. I think those chapters that came to that were about Kathy, those were my chapters where I had to put the book down and just really soak in the depth, the evilness of this character. Like, I don't think I've ever read a character that just embodies evil as much as Kathy. It's just it was incredible to me to see the things that she does even as a child. You know, we heard those first couple of chapters where we're introduced with her, what she does with her with the neighborhood boys, what she does with her Latin teacher, what she does with her parents. I mean, it kind of makes you. Are we allowed to give spoilers here? I don't know. I was kind
Yes,
of
we
dancing
may.
around that.
Get ready, everybody. You've had plenty of time. This man wrote this in 1952.
You know, you've had plenty of time. That's right. You're not there yet. Come on now. Right?
That's your fault. So, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I mean, with Kathy, it's interesting because I was reading a criticism of Steinbeck when it comes to Kathy's character, because usually we kind of get a backstory as to why people are evil. We don't get that backstory with Kat. She is just evil for the sake of being
born evil.
Yeah, she was like born evil. You know, like with the neighborhood boys, she like flirts with them, entices them sexually at a young age. The Latin teacher, she seduces him, drives him crazy enough for him to take his own life. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
You know, that is just that to me made that character so unforgettable, you know. And the fact that she can, after that, you know, her father came down on her for the things she did with the boys and with the teacher, and for her to kind of twist and put that mask on and act as if she's just like this perfect girl. I've learned my lesson, Daddy. And in one night, she burns the whole house down with her parents in it. Not a blink without a blink. I mean, what is that? Who does that? Right? That's the moment where I had to put the book down. And I'm like, what is this? What just happened here?
Yeah.
You know?
Just so you know, the moment where I put the book down involved her. And I'll just say this, and I'll give people a little morsel to try to, this might induce them to read the book. She did something with our main character, Adam Trask. She did something with his brother. And the way it depicts it, there's a naturalism to Steinbeck. There's this plain spoken, here's what happened, and this is what happened, that hits you harder. And it was as dark, as nasty as, well, she goes nastier, but I had to walk away because that was rough.
What specifically? Because I can think of several.
Well, it involves sex.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, she sleeps with the brother, Charles, right?
Charles.
It's interesting because it's when you read it, you recognize that, you know, we have to introduce the brothers and how it is that they're just kind of they're Cain and Abel, essentially, from the Bible. It's a Cain and Abel story. The brother, there's two generations. I always
Charles and Adam, and then Caleb and Aaron. Yeah.
So Adam is kind of like the good one, I guess, right? For lack of a better one. He's kind of like the naive one. And Charles is the wicked one. Like he's got this streak about him, right? And it's interesting to read that Kate was kind of intimidated by him. She's not intimidated by many people, but she was intimidated by two in particular, and he was one of them, because I think she recognized herself in him, in that kind of streak of wickedness.
Sure.
And you're absolutely right, Ruben. When she just kind of naturally, she drugged Adam, her husband, and then just kind of nonchalantly went to go sleep with her brother. I mean, it's.
And I think the reason why that was so crazy too, Ozzie, tell me if you think differently, but I felt like maybe she didn't have to do that. I mean, I think she had already, you know, she could get away with what she was doing without doing that. But I think she did it because she's just bad, and because she could do it.
Yeah.
And oh man, that was.
I don't think she ever wanted to be with Adam. I don't think she loved him. I don't think she's capable of love. She was just with them as a kind of an escape because she was coming. It was kind of like her meal ticket, I guess. But there was just something that she recognized with Charles that she just kind of gravitated towards, and it kind of leads us to question whether the children, the twins that she ultimately had, were Adams or were they did they belong to Charles? I don't know.
I vote Charles.
I vote Charles too.
I would say, and I'm gonna say crazy, I'd say one of each, because they're two separate
Wow.
sets. And that you can't do that. Yes.
You can. Yes, you can.
Yes. And I just knew that. I learned about that recently. And
She's
so
a busy gal,
I'm thinking it's possible that one of each.
Interesting.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
I do want to mention that it's so, gosh, the whole conversation could just stick around, stick Kathy, but I do want to mention there is an attempt to analyze her, to understand her. At one point, oh, what a scene this was, people, when Adam goes back, and you hope he doesn't do it. You pray, don't go back. I mean, this woman is truly become, I'll put you this way, she works in the oldest profession, and he goes to visit her, and what a conversation, what an intense thing. At one point he tells her, you only see one side. You think that's all that there is. She's so cynical. She's so dark in her understanding of the human character that she can't see that there could ever be a good motive in anybody. No. And he says it's like someone can't see the color green, but they may never know they can't. So there is an attempt through the character of Adam to try to understand her. And
but is that really fair? Like, can we really, like, he wants to kind of force her into his world, you know, this world of good and bad, and look, what you're doing is not good and bad. That's like a foreign language for her, you know. It's she doesn't really understand that, you know, and she doesn't really bend towards that.
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't think Adam was able to have that conversation without talking to Samuel, because Adam was in a cloud, just delusion over. And then I think he started seeing it, right? When you get that cloud, just, goes away, and he starts saying, oh, geez. And so I think he was expecting him to be where he's at, or he's figuring it out. Yeah. And she's not there.
She's not. And you know, I'm glad that you brought up Samuel, because that's another character that really stuck with me more than what I thought it would. I mean, Kathy sticks with you for the obvious reasons, you know, but for the evilness of it. But Samuel sticks with you for the opposite. He's such a good person. He's so wise, you know. I mean, his namesake in the Bible, right? That you get that connection to the Bible,
right?
But he's such a good person and so incredibly intelligent about the ways of the world. Maybe not so much academically, but just smart about the ways of the world and the ways of people. And it's him and his interaction with Adam that really kind of is the saving grace for Adam, to have him kind of come back out of that fog, so to an extent, you know.
Absolutely. And just like we can talk about the great sociopaths in literature, we could talk about the great people. I think about Samuel, and as I was reading this book, I was thinking about George and Of Mice and Men.
Yeah.
These people that are just, there's something great. And at one point, what a character. And Adam asked Samuel, was she beautiful? Was she very beautiful, Samuel? And Samuel's response is, to you she was, because you built her. I don't think you ever saw her, only your own creation. Isn't that true about us? People that you know, we do that sometimes with other people, often with the opposite side, you know, people we like.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of what makes this novel really so great. Like, it really cuts down to humanity, to who we are as people, you know. Like, it takes you through these examples of the shortcomings and the wonderfulness of being human through two generations. You know, it's kind of like the same story told twice, 3 times if you want to count the main father back in the day. I mean, he was a weird character too, right from the beginning of the book.
Right.
But it's kind of like you see people's shortcomings, and yet you also see the opposite of that. You see people like Samuel. You see people like Lee. Lee is a wonderful character too, of how wonderful people can be and the opposite. You know, you have people like Kathy, how just absolutely awful people can be.
Now, I want to go back to Lee right now because it's going to open a can of worms that I'm ready for.
Is this the fight you were having with your brother, Jake? Are we going to recreate something here?
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Lee too, actually. But go ahead.
We're going to get to Lee because Lee's the. I just want to close the door on Samuel just real quickly.
Yeah.
Samuel, after he tells, or it might have been right before he tells the creation Adam built, and he was never the same after this. Yeah. Not only after this conversation, Samuel is so concerned at the way Adam is treating his little boys because he's in his own fog after what his wife did to him, abandoning the family, right? That he forgets, hey, you have 2 children now.
Yeah.
And he proceeds, I hate to say, this is the first time we're cussing on the air, maybe the second time. He proceeds to kick his ass.
Yes.
This old man Samuel kicks Adam's ass. Now, this is
my favorite scene in the book, so you know.
You know, this opened his eyes. Yeah. And I started reflecting. Charles, when they were kids, used to beat him up because some people need that.
Yeah.
Sometimes literally, sometimes figurative. They need to get shaken, you know, to wake up. That was great.
After Kathy, literally a week after she gave birth to the twins, right? She just got up and wanted to leave. I think didn't he lock her in the room for a while?
Yeah, for a moment he locked it, and then as she was getting towards him, I think I don't know why he unlocks it, but he had locked it.
He opened the door and she's standing there with a gun, right? And she's like, she ends up shooting him like in the shoulder or something. That's how she walks out. Like
just walks up, just shoots out.
And walks
to a whorehouse
with dead eyes. Her eyes are just
nothing.
dead.
Nothing.
Never.
So he's there with twins, and for a full year, he refuses to give them a name. Not refuses, but like you said, Ruben, he's just so in a cloud that for an entire year he doesn't give them a name. And it's that scene where Samuel just essentially really kicks his ass. That forces him to finally give his own children a name. Finally, after a year. You know? But,
and I don't want to jump ahead here, but I just feel like that's just going back in the book, what that happened to Adam and his father. His father didn't know how to take care of him when his wife died. And so you kind of feel like it's also a message that's kind of saying, you know what, it's sin kind of follows generation after generation, or a type of behavior, we could say, generation after generation. And his father didn't know what to do with him, and now he doesn't know what to do with these kids. But more because of the selfish thing, you're just kind of dealing with your sadness and you're pitying yourself. But yeah, I think that's a theme throughout the book. A different, look at the boys later on. I mean, it's just very similar to his upbringing, right?
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes the book so great is that you have these themes that are kind of reoccurring. Like the same thing that happened to this generation happened to this generation,
right? And
you see that kind of generational, trauma, or just kind of something has to be done, and nothing's being done about it. So it continues. It's cyclical.
And I think that's the whole thing of East of Eden, right? I think that's where he's tying in the Bible, and you look at that, the biblical piece where you see that happening in generation, people doing wrong until they decide to do right.
Yeah, and which goes to the heart of the book, right? Which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit.
So let's talk about Lee. Let's talk about I have a bone. We had a little discussion, my brother and I. He didn't read the ending. He didn't have time to read the end.
Listen, that's a big book, and I got to the little.
That's
I
no excuse. That's no excuse, Jake.
Every day I was reading that book. Every day I read that book.
Okay.
Every day I read that book.
I need to say. I loved it.
I love the book.
It is one of the things I was going to mention is talk about. I can't say this is. It's hard to say what's my favorite book ever, but I know my favorite ending ever is this one.
See, I know the ending. I read the
last word, and I'll leave it at that.
I did read the ending.
If you didn't get to the ending,
I did. I read the ending.
What are you doing?
I read the ending. Listen, that's a big book. I'm very proud of myself that I went through that freaking book this week.
Why don't Ruben and I continue this conversation, and then Jacob, you go finish the book, and when you're done, you can come back.
I'm feeling a lot like Adam right now.
But maybe this discussion will encourage people to get. I mean,
get to the end.
The book is great, but the ending is what a payoff.
And I do know the ending, guys. But go ahead.
And we have to talk about Lee to talk about that.
Yeah.
The character of Lee in this book is so powerful in the sense that he's a Chinese servant. And what depth and range and wisdom of this. At one point, he's reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and he's quoting from it. I love how Steinbeck will philosophize in the book. He'll take a moment and take a page to talk about what he thinks. And he's very interested in a word in the Bible, in the Cain and Abel story. And he obsesses over a word and over various translations. And he finds fault with the New American Standard Version and the King James Version over a word. When Cain and Abel when that story unfolds, thou shalt have triumph over sin, shalt have triumph, or must have triumph, according to the Standard American. Which is it? You're going to, or you have to have triumph over sin? But what Lee notes is when he went back to the original Hebrew, and how many people do that? How many people might not learn the actual idea behind a passage? He says, thou mayest. In the Old Hebrew, it says, it gives you more freedom. At one point, he says, it is the splendor of gods. How does he put it? I think
he puts it down that this elevates humans to the level of gods.
Right, absolutely, and the word is timshel, I believe.
Yes, timshel.
It makes a man. I wrote it. It makes a man great and gives him status with the gods, because it's a very different word, and it gives you it really puts the whole passage and your choices in a very different light, doesn't it?
It's that, and that's actually that's at the heart of the novel, of the entire novel, right? That theme is really at the center of what this whole novel is. I mean, it was interesting that I believe he's Chinese American, right? I believe he was born
in America.
And it's so his character is so interesting because to the outside world, he plays on that Chinese stereotype. Down to
pidgin English.
The pidgin English. And the outside world treats him, unfortunately, in that way. In that they call him these awful names and just treat him as subhuman. And when he finally opens up, you're just like, he's the most articulate character of the entire novel.
Intelligent, I think he went to school as well,
Yes. So when he finally, it's interesting because he's so intelligent that this one Bible story just really, it sticks with him, and it's a question in his mind as to what's going on here, So it's the King James Version of, it's a promise, right? You will overcome evil. The Standard American Version is you shall, so it's an order. You shall overcome evil. So he saw there's a disparity between those two. So for him to actually go back and dig into the weeds and actually go back to the original Hebrew and make this realization, it's neither you shall or you will, it's you may. And that just opens up an entire door for him because that speaks to our ability to make our own choices. Like you have the ability to make these choices for yourself, and it's a choice. And I could be wrong, but the way I picked it up from the book, but it's a choice that's kind of devoid of any divine ramifications. It's not like you need to choose. You're free to choose, but if you don't choose this way, you're going to have consequences. Right? Because that's really not freedom. Right? So it's kind of like you are free to live your life. And you have the freedom to make your life whatever it is that you want. You have the freedom to choose these things. And it's that realization of, I can make this life what I want it to be. I don't have to be chained to the past. And a lot of these characters we were talking about that, Jacob, just that intergenerational cycle. You don't have to be chained to that intergenerational cycle. You can
make a choice.
You can make a choice to separate and do something that's free from that vicious cycle that you came from.
And the new sons, well, really one of them, really felt the generational pull when he finds out about his mother. And so that freedom as expressed through the Lee character really set him apart. What a blessing this man was to that family.
Definitely.
Lee was. And
He
I do
helped
want
bring
to
them
say,
up, those kids, yeah.
absolutely. And I do want to say that Lee at one point says, he's talking to Samuel, and he says, does your wife, who's very religious and reads the Bible, does she not understand the paradoxes of the Bible? And then Samuel says, no, she refuses. It's a very rigid idea that is painted with his wife, whereas Samuel is a really great, really theological discussion between the three over several verses, really down to one. And I think it's a very useful dialogue to have of, wait a minute, are there not paradoxes, and aren't there not, paradox is a nice way to put contradiction, but really, and to wrestle them out and to ask questions. What were you going to say, Jacob?
No, I would say, yeah. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is Samuel says around that time where they're having that discussion, most people don't read the details. It's the details that astonish me. And I think that's what you're sharing, Ruben, that his wife was pretty much like, I think she even says to him, like, you don't have to know what it says. I mean, just kind of do it. We don't, we're not gonna understand it, but I think he really wanted to understand it. And like Lee, which there are people like that in this world, right? It's like, oh, whatever it says, I'm sure it's something in there is good. I'm going to do. No, look at what it's really saying and study it. And I think, and I might be wrong here, but I think Steinbeck would say the Bible is a piece of literature, like my book East of Eden is a piece of literature. Study it, wrestle with it, grapple with it, and then come to some conclusions, hopefully. And it might be different conclusions from the guy next to you. So,
because ultimately you have a choice, right? Isn't that's at the heart of this? Ultimately, you do have that choice. But it's interesting because his wife is so rigid religiously, and she doesn't even drink. But towards the end of the novel, she picks up the drink because of medical issues, but she really hits it.
She enjoys it for sure.
She sees the light. Bless her. God bless her. She sees the light.
That's right.
But
absolutely.
Go ahead. What was the argument you guys were having?
No, it was just about maybe not finishing at the end. And
is that what it is?
So good. But can I just mention something else though? Because I'm gonna forget now that you mentioned that, Oz. Because as I'm reading this, I'm thinking this is great for English teachers. There's so much great stuff. How do I teach it for a history teacher? What do I bring out? And I teach a unit on immigration. And there's a piece I deal with the Chinese Exclusion Act. We talk about how Asians were, and even today, guys, I mean, I could bring that, we could look at things today. So I'm always trying to find stuff to kind of bring, not only for today, but back then. And I would totally bring up the piece. I would read the piece out of the book regarding when Samuel goes, hey, wait a minute. That's not how you talk. Like he was talking to Lee, and Lee's like, oh yeah, he was going off, and he's like, wait a minute. And Lee was like, oh, I guess I got to come out clean. And I think I could come out clean to this guy. He's going to listen to me. And he comes out clean. And then Samuel's like, all right. He treats him with respect, like you treat anybody else. And I think that was one of my favorite parts of the book as well. And I would bring that up saying, this is how people were treated. This guy is educated, and they just look at the outside. They don't look at who he is. And we do that today, and we do, and I think it'd be that's how I would bring it into my history class when I'm talking about, the history of Asians, especially Chinese Americans, as they come into.
It's so interesting too, because I've always seen a similarity, a great similarity between Lee and Samuel, but the clear difference I think is that Lee is an intellectual. Like he picks up these books and the philosophy of it and the learnedness of things, whereas Samuel is good because, for goodness sake, he's just I don't really remember if he ever mentions it, if he's academically educated, but he's educated with life and how to treat, and he's got his finger on the pulse of what it means to be a human being, and the complexities of it, and the difficulties of it, and the joys of it, and he's really in tune with that, and Lee is too, but I think Lee approached it from a more academic, intellectual way, whereas Samuel approaches it from a more humanistic way, but they're both fantastic characters. Like it's characters.
Oh, they are.
If you start off, if you have that unit of sociopaths in literature, these guys would be the complete opposite. Like great people in literature.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes, and just to close the door on the other discussion on the theological, there is a tradition of discussing paradoxes in Christianity. And my favorite theologian, G.K. Chesterton, says, accept the paradox and move on. You don't have to walk away from the faith to absorb them. And what happens is one day it makes more sense later on. Yeah. And this is a great example of a paradox kind of opening up a little bit and you being filled up with knowledge of what it means. This idea of finding the right word. I do.
But that's kind of that's life, though. I think that speaks to the complexity of life. That life oftentimes isn't white or black. There's different shades of gray. Yeah. And paradox is a part of it. Like I always like using the example of tolerance. That at the heart of tolerance is a paradox, because in order for you to live in a tolerant society, you have to be intolerant of intolerance. So that's a paradox, but that's life. Life isn't black or white, here or there. It's not 0 or 10. There's 8, 9, 10, 8, 9, 7. There's grades, and that's just it's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. I do want to say, because it is interesting, this character, back to Kathy Trask. We read this idea of her, talented Mr. Ripley, he's a crazy guy, but when mixed with drink, but even more so Kathy Trask, you mix the drink with her personality and something wicked this way comes. What was your take on that? Any thoughts?
Can I'm gonna be Jake here for a second, and I was brushing up on my Spark Notes and I didn't get to that part. Can you refresh my memory? I remember vaguely that scene, but I don't remember the specifics of what she said.
So what happens is she is as close to the vest as possible, as you could ever meet. Very highly intelligent. And I do want to bring out one thing on page, I guess I can't find it now. I'll just say this, is that she played it close to the vest until she was offered a drink.
Yeah.
Several times in the book, she resisted. But when she did, she became the monster that she was hiding.
It came out. Which usually happens with a drink.
Right.
that one thing we keep inside just kind of boils to the surface.
Well, what I had meant, the reason why I brought up Tom Ripley is because, and then this other character we read, is that for many people, they can drink, and it's not good to overdrink, but things are going to turn out fine usually. Yeah. But with this kind of sociopath, you mix drink with it, for some reason it's a very combustible mix.
Yeah.
It unleashes this nastiness, but it ended up working well for Adam, because when he went back, he was drunk. And it got her to drink, and then he saw her for what she really was.
That's right.
Because it was like her kryptonite. It was her kryptonite. I mean, in a way, because, and she was trying, like you said, Ruben, she tried to keep things to the vest, and she knew when she drank, she was going to unleash that. So she was very careful not to do it. And the time she did, it came out, and she was awful.
If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Adam walked away with an aha moment there. Did he? Like, he kind of, you said, he really saw her for who she was.
He was done with her. Yeah.
He was done. He walked away, and it was actually a good thing that he saw what he saw.
Yeah, for sure. I would say one thing, one last thing with that character too, Kathy, is that I was reading somewhere, Steinbeck's family said, you know what, everything's great, but Kathy, she's it's a little bit unbelievable, that evil. And he goes, and he said, I knew someone like her.
Wow.
Like,
well,
whoa.
I've read that criticism of the novel that the character of Kathy isn't real. It's not.
Right. He's based
human.
on someone.
So they see that almost as a fault.
Right.
I have two things to say. One of them is and Ozzy, you could speak to this, but isn't it true that sometimes you have to go a little bit over the top in fiction, because fiction isn't exactly real life, of course. So you have to paint it a little darker, maybe, to get the point home.
Yeah.
One thing, and then the second thing was, this was one of the questions I was going to ask is, do you know a Kathy? I'm not talking to you, Ozzy. Because I asked last week if you knew a Tom Ripley, Jake.
Yeah.
Now, do you know a Kathy, or have you known a Kathy? Obviously, you're not going to mention her name, but
Right.
No, I mean,
him.
I got trait by trait. I have not, because Kathy, the character of Kathy is just, she's one in a million. But you see these traits in people. You see, like I always tell the kids that literature are lies. Literature is lies, but they're lies that tell human truths. They tell bigger human truths. And sometimes, like you said, you have to tell these big lies to really get to the point of what you're trying to make when it comes to humanity. And you see in people that you meet these kind of character flaws and the where they fail as human beings, either to some extent or other, like, but it's true. Like I've met people that I walk away thinking, man, what are you? Who hurt you? Like for you to end up being the way you are, and it just leaves you wondering like that. So have you guys?
I don't know, Ruben, have you? I can't think of any offhand. I did have one student once she would do things and I go, why do you do these things? Like really like bad, like stealing, and I'm like, why do you do this? And she couldn't come up, and I'm like, oh no, she's missing something in there. In the center.
I gotta tell you, Jake, now that you mentioned that, I have a student my first 5 years I did middle school.
Right.
I think everybody's got to do middle school, right? They got to get their.
I did mine.
And there was a student who was like that. Like she would steal all of my black color pencils, and she would just keep them to herself. And there was just this meanness and nastiness to her. Yeah. And I had a parent conference with her mom, and I'll never forget this. I mean, this was like 17 years ago. The mother says she said that the girl one day overdosed. She attempted to overdose with pills. And the mother said through tears, she says, I feel so guilty because there was a moment where I thought, I hope she's successful.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, like, wow, like what is happening? What has happened with this child's life that even the mother is recognizing that what is this? What is this that I have in my house? Ironically enough, I saw that same student as a parent at a parent conference night at my daughter's middle school when she was there. And she recognized me. And I said, hi, how are you? And she's like, oh, good. And then she kind of walked along. But she's a mom now herself. So
maybe she turned it around, I hope.
Maybe going back to the theme of the novel, right? Maybe she recognized, she kind of made that choice for herself to switch things around, because she went from being a middle school Kathy to now a mom, and she was there with her kids, and
amazing.
Fingers crossed. I don't know.
Wow.
That's a good story. I don't think I could top that one. I do want to say that I was just reflecting because I want to get to the idea of why Steinbeck writes so much about the setting and the Salinas Valley. And at one point, the Salinas Valley is in Northern California. It's a long, narrow swale between two ranges of mountains, and the Salinas River winds and twists up the center until it falls at last into Monterey Bay. He has several passages like that, and I was really just reading it over and over again because I want to get into his mind. And this is just a thought, but you could look at some of those passages of the setting, and you go, two different people can walk away with two different things. One, they look at the beauty of it, but they also look at you can look at that and see the danger. This is a dangerous area, and it makes you tough if you can confront it and live in it and walk away from it. So this is just a thought, but any thoughts about that or anything else you want to talk about in terms of the book that maybe you wanted to cover?
I remember the first, when I first started reading that first chapter, I remember finishing that first chapter and thinking, this is the, going back to the book of Genesis. This is almost, you can read that first chapter as kind of a take on the biblical creation story. You know, first there were these, the nature, and then there was these animals, and then the humans came. So I kind of took that first chapter as kind of a nod to the book of Genesis and the whole creation story. But there is that interesting setting. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the Salinas Valley. It's very beautiful up there.
I've been,
but
no, I don't think so.
It's the way he describes it, you know, it's this valley stuck between these two mountain ranges, right? And it's interesting to see him describe one of those mountain ranges as kind of dangerous and in the dark and perilous, whereas the other one is like beautiful and the sun hits it, and with the sunset and these gorgeous. So you almost, right from the get-go, you have this theme of good versus evil.
It's contrast,
right smack in this creation story, you know.
Right.
So that's how I took it. You know, I didn't take it the way you did, Ruben, but it goes back to, like, we all take what we can when we read from stuff, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was great that in the story, he's coming from Connecticut, I believe, to Salinas Valley, and in his life, he went from Salinas Valley to the East Coast, you know, because there's this, I think it's this in life, you're developing, you're growing as a person, and you're moving forward. And in this book, of course, Adam's he wanted to move forward. I want to get out of my brother's house. I want to move and get my life together. And I think even with Steinbeck, with his life, he was getting very successful, and he left his home, and we became a New York guy, you know. Yeah. And so I think that is sort of us, right? I mean, we're growing, and we may not leave where we're at, but hopefully we're growing as human beings. And I think that's part of the story here too. I mean, like we talked about the ending, the whole idea of
we read the ending, by the way.
Yeah, well, I did, but I didn't read all the nitty gritty of it. I read most of that thing, and I'm feeling bad about this little piece.
I mean,
okay.
the ending, this is one of those great books that gets kind of has different peaks, you know, like at different moments of, like, you think it's over and it's downhill from, but then it kind of peaks again. And the ending, it really just kind of ties everything together, because you have two generations of being stuck in that vicious cycle, you know, and you finally come to the ending of the novel, and you have Lee telling Adam, like, this is your boy here, you know, he's gonna be stuck in this cycle until you give him your blessing. And the blessing that he finally gives him,
maybe don't give the very major plot spoiler, in the sense that not the very last line. It's too good. He needs to earn it, Ozzie.
He needs to. That's right.
No, I did read the last line. I thought I read the lead. I just skipped to the last part.
He did. We put in the work, Ozzie. He didn't serve it up to him.
Oh man.
But it's a beautiful ending. It's a beautiful ending that I think it comes down to the heart of the novel, and the fact that you are free to break from whatever cycle you were stuck in the past, to kind of forge your own. And finally, at the end, you have that permission, you have that catharsis, that freedom to do so. And it was a great ending.
Great ending.
Ozzie, what do you rank it? Like, before we go, I know we're running on here, but what would you rank that in your top books have you read? Is it top 20, top 10, top 5? What is
top 5, man?
Me too. I loved it.
It's you know, I tell my daughter, who thankfully I is a reader, and I tell her that we have this theory of literary hangover. You know, like books that when you read that last page, and you close the book, you just have to sit there, and you're like, wow. You know, like I had that with I remember 1984. I had the opposite kind of hangover with that. Like I was in a state of fear. It was petrified, you know. Yeah. But this one too, you close it and you're like, this was amazing. I just went through something amazing, and it's top 5, easy. I do want to bring up one more thing, and I don't know if it was in your thing, but we need to talk quickly about the movie.
I haven't seen the movie, but you could talk about it, please.
Okay, Jake, have you seen it?
Love the movie. That's why I was excited about the book.
All right. Now the movie is. I was surprised to. I saw the movie first before I.
It's the
I
second
read
part of the book, huh?
It's just the whole second part of the book. Like
Yeah.
it's completely missing the first half of the novel. And I thought they got to remake this movie. They got to.
Now the second part is great, don't you think? I mean, I think it's done. James Dean, he does a great job, but they have to do the first part because I think it's the best part.
I think so too. I agree with you completely, Jay. And I apparently when I was looking up, it was in the works, but I guess they ran into problems with the Steinbeck estate or something. Like 10 years ago, it was in the works, but I think now they got to make it like a 6-part mini series or something. Like 2 hours will not make it do it justice.
I might be wrong, but I thought they made a miniseries.
They did, I think, like in the early '80s, but I don't think I hadn't seen it, but I don't know anything about it. So
no,
I mean, they got to do something really like now.
When it comes, I have a problem with James Dean though. I don't.
Oh, he did 3 movies.
Did he play he played the Adam Trask character?
No, he played Cal. Cal.
Wow.
Doesn't it seem that, and I know this is, I'm sure I have this idea because I know I heard it somewhere else. I'm not taking credit for this, but doesn't it seem like he plays the same character in all 3 of his movies?
I think that's how he, you know what? And I would say this, how he studied in James Dean and his studying, I think he came from that world of, be passionate and
it's like the same character. Like it's this
it was the same character.
Emo syrupy kind of droopy-eyed,
but he sure did it well. No, I think he did it well for. I like how he did it with Cal.
Maybe we'll review the movie for Movie Week because I've never seen it, and now I'm interested.
Really?
Okay. But by the way, it's the mark of a great writer that even the minor characters really pop. Remember the character Joe who worked at the whorehouse, as he was trying to one up on Kate.
Yeah.
Those scenes when he was in and out of pool halls and bar rooms and things like that, and as he was sleuthing, as he was preparing and meeting shady characters, Steinbeck could have been a great detective or mystery writer, hard boiled, one of those hard, because those things sound like those little pages. But even the minor characters, Charles was kind of a minor character, and he was fully, painted. You could just
if you kind of map out the family tree, there was a moment when I was reading and I'm thinking, why does Steinbeck dedicate chapters to Samuel's family? Like they don't really play.
I thought the same way, Oz. I thought that they were very minor, but you know why? I think that's his family. That's Steinbeck's based on his family, and I think he brought them prominence because of that.
Yeah, and they have their own problems amongst themselves, but I think the only thing I can think of is you want to kind of compare that family to the Trask family, who is
that's the only thing, because technically, if you were to take them out and just leave Samuel, I think you're good, personally.
Yeah, because just on their own, but they're interesting characters. These little characters in there, he really kind of dives into some of these characters, and they're very interesting to read.
Right. And then he tells you how they do in the next 15, 20 years, and they're like, I think it's family history.
It just adds. It's like the sprinkles to the cupcake. It just really adds to the wonderfulness of this novel.
I think it's my favorite. I've read a few Steinbecks. It's my favorite Steinbeck book, even though I think people would say Grapes of Wrath.
We're reviewing other Steinbeck books this week, and I will say this: I love Hemingway, but in terms of best American writer, for me, it's going to be. I think it might be Steinbeck, but tell us what you think, everybody. And Ozzie, thank you for recommending this book.
Thank you, Oz.
And for having this discussion with us.
Anytime, guys. You should really thank my wife, but I'll extend your thanks to her.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Anytime, guys.
Appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all next time. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Bye-bye.